His chestnut hair is low, making his forehead less prominent, and he can look fierce when angry. Although people's appearances vary, Julien's is compelling because he has a good build, though he appears slightly frail and not very robust, more agile than solid. Stendhal's description here might seem a bit verbose, which is a common feature in French novels. Some readers might find it dense and wonder if they can skip large sections. But this passage is very vivid. For example, in Chinese physiognomy, if someone's forehead isn't full, it might indicate some hardship in their youth. Julien is portrayed as a delicate, intellectual type with a tyrannical personality, which is reflected in his appearance, demeanor, and physique. Now, what kind of woman is Madame de Rênal? Before Julien arrives, Madame de Rênal follows the traditional trajectory of a noblewoman's life. She spent her youth in a convent, married a socially suitable husband with a considerable fortune, and had 3 children. Besides taking care of her children, she spends the rest of her time praying. What about her relationship with the mayor? Stendhal writes that she has never experienced or even seen a hint of love. This suggests that many couples in noble families at that time might have married merely for social standing, without genuine love. Although Madame de Rênal is the mother of 3 children, she remains inexperienced and untouched by life's trials. However, she is very beautiful with a graceful figure and a natural charm. According to local standards, she is considered a beauty, and her innocence gives her a pure, vibrant quality. To Parisians, she might even seem like a romantic ideal. Madame de Rênal is beautiful and cultured, which can spark romantic fantasies. Yet she has never experienced romance herself, setting the stage for future developments. When they first met, Julien boldly took Madame de Rênal's hand and kissed it. This hand-kissing gesture might seem common in many films and historical accounts about France, but it's not typically done this way. Madame de Rênal is the lady of the house, and Julien is just a tutor. Their initial meeting would usually involve many formalities. But where did Julien perform this hand-kissing gesture? It was during a walk in the garden that Julien secretly kissed Madame de Rênal's hand. This means it didn't happen in a public social setting, but on a garden path, giving it an air of private intimacy. This was Julien's way of testing the waters. After numerous such tests, Julien realizes he has won Madame de Rênal's special affection. He then boldly sneaks into her bedroom at night. This action is incredibly daring. When I first read it, I found it hard to believe that the same Julien, who was too timid to even ring a doorbell, would do such a thing. But blinded by ambition, a person can perform unimaginable acts. Julien kneels before Madame de Rênal, speaking passionately about his love. And Madame de Rênal, she succumbs? Having never been loved or experienced romance, she had merely married and become a mother and wife. This time, she is overwhelmed by Julien's intense love, or perhaps deceived by it. She forgets her status and willingly falls into the trap of this love, giving her sympathy, admiration, and affection to the young man. They spend a sweet night together. At this point, neither Julien nor Madame de Rênal realizes they are stepping closer to the abyss. That night, Madame de Rênal is immersed in the happiness of love, feeling so content she can hardly sleep. She begins to long for Julien every day. Later, Julien, encouraged by this passion, becomes bolder. In front of Monsieur de Rênal, he even touches Madame de Rênal's arm exposed from her clothing. Her beauty distracts him, and he can't control himself, letting his cheek touch her arm and then kissing it. Madame de Rênal perceives Julien's wild behavior as genuine passion, unable to restrain his feelings, and believes this to be love. Thus, she, a married woman, can no longer control herself and falls deeply into this love affair. Such feelings she never experienced with her husband. Even the passionate kisses from Julien were new to her. So, Madame de Rênal feels that before Julien, she had never truly lived. The happiness Julien brings makes her forget everything else. Stendhal writes, "Suddenly words like adultery, debauchery, and licentiousness surface in her mind, conjuring vulgar and shameful scenes. Madame de Rênal feels deeply troubled, sensing torment and unease. At this time, Julien, to calm Madame de Rênal, confesses, saying, "I should leave, I must leave, but I am madly in love with you. This is undoubtedly wrong, especially for a young cleric. It's a great sin." Julien's words are a strategy, saying he must leave to elicit a stronger response from her. Madame de Rênal, fearing the loss of her lover, finds this unbearable. One night, Julien appears again in Madame de Rênal's room, crying and speaking words of despair. This leaves Madame de Rênal deeply conflicted and feeling guilty towards Julien, who loves her so intensely that he can't bear it. She feels that pushing him away would be too cruel. Thus, she decisively throws herself into Julien's arms. Initially, this situation is Julien's scheme, but the naive Madame de Rênal gives her true feelings. On the other hand, she believes herself to be unforgivable and destined for hell, thinking that every encounter with Julien is a final indulgence before damnation, which only fuels their passion. During that time, they share endless conversations and high spirits. Even if they discuss trivial matters, hearing his voice and seeing him makes life lively, busy, and joyful. Madame de Rênal's maid says, "Even during the carnival ball, Madame never dressed so carefully. Now she changes clothes 2 or 3 times a day." Madame de Rênal, with her snow-white skin, made several low-cut blouses. With her graceful figure, she looked stunning in these outfits. You see, someone truly in love becomes remarkably beautiful and radiant. Subsequently, Julien also finds himself trapped in the net he wove. How could he remain indifferent to someone so lovable, beautiful, and genuine in their affection for him? Julien genuinely falls in love as well. These two share similarities. They both have little experience with love. In a sense, this is their first love, and they stumble into it driven by sheer passion. Madame de Rênal, although a mother, has a heart like a love-struck teenager. Julien, on the other hand, can't discern whether his feelings are part of his plan or genuine emotion, constantly pushing himself to achieve small feats. For instance, tonight he must touch Madame de Rênal's arm. He calls it his duty, but what is it? It's called crossing boundaries, right? Yet, the most forbidden things are always incredibly tempting. Julien keeps breaking taboos again and again. The bigger the tree, the more wind it catches. The more famous Julien becomes, the higher the risks.